Brenda, you can call roll call. Start roll call, please.
Okay, we'll start with Director Alvarado. Director Alvarado, can you hear me?
Director Alvarado?
I don't think you can.
Okay. We'll keep going then. We see him here. He's here. Director Stanley? Director Stanley? Do we have Director Stanley in here?
Yes.
Okay. So I see she's present, but she's muted. Director Weiner?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hear you.
We have one.
Vice President? Yes. Vice President Cepeda?
Here.
Thank you. And President Sedif?
Yes, ma'am. I am here.
Madam Clerk, I wanted to make sure that the other two directors can hear and be heard. Can we try one more time to make sure that we've got Director Alvarado and Director Stanley accessible here?
Director Alvarado, can you hear?
Let's try and call him.
Yeah, should we try texting them to see if they know that we can't hear them?
I just sent him a text.
Okay.
And then perhaps, Madam Clerk, could you unmute Director Stanley? It looks like she's on mute. Perhaps that would help.
Director Stanley? Council. I've asked Director Stanley to unmute herself.
It looks like that feedback's coming from Director Alvarado.
I think he muted himself now.
He's on mute now.
He can probably hear us since he's talking.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hear you now.
Okay. I had to join via my phone because my computer, for some reason, it's not doing it.
Okay.
So I'm gonna stay muted.
Okay. And then Director Stanley, if you can unmute yourself. So I have asked Director Stanley to unmute herself. However, she's still muted, so I'm not sure she can hear us.
So
Go ahead, Lisa, go ahead.
I was just going to say, perhaps we can suggest that Director Stanley log out and come back into the meeting and see if that resolves. I mean, there is a quorum of the board present, and maybe that would resolve it.
Let me.
Or can someone text her and
I will.
Y'all can hear me now, right?
Yes.
All right.
President Suddeth, would you like us to proceed or do you want to wait a minute?
We'll wait another 30 seconds and then we can proceed.
Okay.
Just text her as well. There she is.
Director Stanley, can you hear us?
Okay, I text her and let us know when she can unmute. So let's just proceed.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to Pledge of Allegiance or observation of moment of silence.
All right. We're going to take a moment of silence unless someone wants to do the pledge. You can do so on your own. Thank you very much. So,
You're on mute, VP Cesar.
Oh, I can start over. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with
with
liberty.
liberty and justice for all.
thank you very much. We can move on, please.
Next item is public comment, items not on the agenda. Madam President, we do not have any public comment at this moment.
All right, wonderful. We can move on.
Next item is the President's 2021 message.
Thank you very much. All right, it is 2021. Feliz Año Nuevo. So we made it. Happy New Year. I wanted to just briefly talk to you all. It's definitely, we all started out hoping that 2021 would be different from 2020. Surprise. This year certainly started our 100th year different than ever before. And unfortunately for a lot of people, it's still the challenging times we saw last year has continued into this year. I wanted to talk to you about a few things. The district continues to experience lots of growth and change. And as we know, the growth and change and technology and all of those factors that continue to change our daily lives, that we continue to adjust to, it confronts us with new opportunities to meet the demands of our daily lives and also of this district. Every year this time, we take a few moments and we reflect on the previous year and we look at the upcoming year. And as we continue to navigate this path that we've been on for the last 10 months, I want to say that it's been grateful that we've been able to, as a group and as this West County wastewater community, we've been able to shapeshift, to adapt to all of the things that have been happening in the community and in this world. An overused word, resilience, has been shown in action in our workforce and in our leadership. The determination and boldness that this leadership team and our workforce has shown has been amazing, to say the least. Before this last year, most people never knew the word coronavirus or COVID outside of the scientific community. Now it's part of everybody's lexicon. Change. Change is hard. Change is hard even by itself. And then rapid change is even harder. And when this pandemic, it upended all of our worlds and transformed all of our everyday lives, our leadership team here at the district shifted into quick action to adapt our operations and adhere to all of these regulatory requirements and meet the needs of the community while still putting our staff's health and safety at the forefront. And these pivots, these quick pivots, included some exceptional efforts by our entire district ecosystem, the executive leadership team, the operations, the administrative, and the IT team. And it provided our staff with needed support and resources to adapt to remote work conditions, to develop a range of new sustainability measures, and to create a virtual meeting plan to handle previous in-person meetings and trainings. And in this transition from in-person gatherings and Zoom programming, we discovered a new way of meeting, of sharing information and maintaining our relationships. And in the midst of it all, in all of this change, we have to acknowledge what hasn't changed. And that has been a steadfast commitment to the district staff, who since March have worked well beyond the scope of their job descriptions and 1,000 more collective hours than their time reports would suggest in response to the worst world health crisis in our lifetimes. Your collective efforts, responses, and adjustments, your resilience and vitality deserve our respect and recognition. On behalf of the board of directors, we are deeply grateful for each one of you. We know that without you, there would be no West County Wastewater. Thank you. Muchas gracias. Now, as we find ourselves still maneuvering through all of these stay-at-home protocols and ever-evolving health orders and cautious reopening, closing, reopening guidelines, we hope that all of you are finding ways to be with your families and healthily manage the deepened concerns and added stresses of our already busy lives, and ways to enjoy one another's companies and fulfill these months of forced quarantine. We acknowledge how devastating the financial impact that COVID has been on many families, businesses, and organizations, yet notwithstanding the uncertainties and obstacles that arose throughout the final quarters of last year, the board is pleased that the staff has worked so diligently to ensure the district remains in solid financial condition, despite the significant financial impacts of COVID-19. So as the 2021 president, I'm honored to work alongside my fellow dedicated board of directors on this exceptional leadership team, who all share the same vision for a healthy, environmentally safe, and clean community. Before we move forward into 2021, I want to take a moment to thank the 2020 Board of Directors for their dedication, service, and leadership over the past year. Under the leadership of, there we go. I thought we were missing people. They saw too, right? Yeah. Under the leadership of our immediate past president, David Alvarado, I'm fortunate to continue to have his support and advice this year. Moving forward, 3 words. As I was contemplating this upcoming year and looking ahead at the challenges we face, I took a review of our strategic plan and our core values. And there was 3 words, the community, distinction, and connection. And this And 3 value words stood out: service, collaboration, and accountability. Many of us will take great pains to talk about these words. We're either in the community or we're campaigning. I wanted to give us something to reach for this year while we are working. And so I've chosen these words as we go forward this year. To be truly effective leaders, we need to spend less time as individual board directors and more time working in collaboration while still being accountable for our individual and collective actions. Because collaboration is imperative to attain the goals we have set for this district. To gain new insights for addressing the common challenges we are facing, and to truly, quote, transform the district into a modern organization that is focused on customer service, public engagement, effective problem solving, collaboration, and community and environmental stewardship, which is what we all agreed when we put together that strategic plan. And to make this happen, we are going to commit to improving our collaboration. We're going to work to all build bridges and use our skills to improve influence to get things done here and in our broader community. And to do that, we have to focus on inclusion as well as to communicate openly with one another, regularly and honestly. Each of us comes with a very good set of skills, but we have to be willing to adapt to and cultivate our working relationships, to be sensitive to and tolerant to differing views with a willingness to listen and work well with one another, individually and in a group. And we have to hold ourselves and one another accountable to the mission of the district. And we must do it in a way that is respectful to ourselves and one another. It is a way we can be of the best service to the district and the community. So how are we gonna do it? There's an African proverb that goes, many hands make light work. We must think of ourselves as interdependent with others. We all have different roles and perspectives and positions that make up the workings of our district, and any decision we make affects, changes, and impacts everyone in different ways. And to carry out any decision, we are dependent on the ability of all the parts to make it work. If anything, our current situation makes it more visible all the parts of the agency have to work together because we depend on each other. A single man cannot build a house. A single tree cannot make a forest. 2 footsteps do not make a path, and 2 do not make a pool. Our board cannot take place if not for the work of the executive team. The executive team cannot lead without the work of the administrative staff that keep information updated in the systems. If not for the work of the IT team in managing the infrastructure for remote and internet connected work platforms, we would not be able to offer remote work opportunities. And perhaps more visible than before is the work of the operational and facilities teams with items like HVAC filters and PPE and sanitizing steam, all of which have even greater importance than before. We can trace everything we do into an interconnected aspect of our mission, from operations to the lab, to engineering, to administration, and even community engagement. We all rely on each other. And everybody's role is important and valuable in the mission of the district. Given that, We're gonna shift a little bit this year. With respect to our meetings, I listened very carefully when Director Wiener and Director Alvarado gave their previous 2019 and 2020 presidential addresses. We wanted to proceed more effectively and efficiently. And they both mentioned this very topic to no avail. We wanted to respect process and each other's time. In actuality, what happened over the last 2 years, our meetings got longer and more contentious. So we're gonna try something different. We're gonna try and adhere to what we've been trying to do the last 2 years. It is our responsibility to be diligent. It is our responsibility to be inquisitive. It is our responsibility to be thorough in discharging our director duties. But I am very certain that we can do that in less than a 3-hour meeting, that we can do that in a 1-hour meeting, that we can do that by valuing each other's time. I value your time. I'm sure you can value mine as well. So in that vein, I want to approach this by reducing these meetings to the 1-hour time frame that it deserves, 90 minutes max. So I implore you to attend your board and committee meetings, well read and prepared to receive information, to ask questions as needed, to be engaged and fully participate in the meetings or any district event you go to advocate for the organization and to take responsibility for and follow through on any of your given assignments. These aren't new asks. This is our responsibility, our director duties that we signed up for. To that end, you may have noticed a change in the presentation of the agenda from previous agendas. I worked directly with the general manager and the general counsel, and this intentional revision is meant to help streamline our deliberations. Directors are encouraged to submit their questions and their requests for additional information to the general manager ahead of these board or committee meetings. As well, we will be implementing time limits on discussions during meetings. As the chair of this particular meeting, and those of you who are chairing committee meetings, you will facilitate the meeting, but we will be moving in the direction of making these meetings centered around the district. So the general manager will be responsible for leading the meeting. The general manager and the staff will be delivering presentations and providing information. This will allow this board to maintain its focus on policymaking and policy approval duties, and making high-level decisions and overseeing the overall performance of the board. Any agenda item that involves a presentation will include a time limit for the presentation, a time limit for the discussion, and a timed Q&A period from the board and the public comment. Vice President Zepeda has agreed to handle the role of parliamentarian. This will help us execute smoother meetings focused on the business of the district. As the board, we have already approved many plans for the staff. We've approved the strategic plan, the operations plan, the climate plan, the budget. We've given them the roadmap. Now it's time to let them execute. I've also been working with the general manager and the general counsel to restructure our committees, and we will talk about that a little later in the meeting. But the major part of that is to make sure it realigns with the district's departmental structure, and it provides the dedicated resources and supports the district's priorities. Again, this is an effort to effect smoother board meetings, and any of the minutia for getting in the weeds can happen at the committee level. We will also be revising the way we handle meetings and service days. We won't get into much of that now, but I will tell you this. Previously discussed, we'll designate directors to attend monthly and quarterly meetings on behalf of the district. This year, 2021, we celebrate 100 years of providing quality services to the community with wastewater programs that not only directly benefit the health and welfare of each household and commercial enterprise in the West County region, yet the impact on our environment. We will get to recognize and celebrate many of the achievements and awards and leadership and hard work that has gone into making this district one of the best. The year ahead promises more challenges, to be certain, but it also holds hope for an end to the pandemic and meaningful progress towards a more equitable. And I hope that soon outside will become legal so that we can continue to cultivate many of our sustainable practices and adaptive strategies and evolve our vision more. Decorum. There's an adage that says we can disagree without being disagreeable. Although our ideas and opinions are the best way to respond to this challenge, or any challenge or issue that we face, can differ. My biggest hope is that we will consider behaving towards one another in a spirit of collegiality. All of us are adults. Compassion and respect, a little grace, a little introspection, and knowing that we are accountable for our actions. In that wake, I've asked the General Counsel to make our first training of 2021 on this topic of decorum. When I think of this, our role as directors, I often think of a saying by Jim John, who sums it up very well in this quote that says, the challenge of leadership is to be strong, but not rude. Be kind, but not weak. Be bold, but do not bully. Be thoughtful, but not lazy. Be humble, but not timid. Be proud, but not arrogant. Have humor, but without folly. As we work together to write this next chapter in the district's history, one that will guide us through these complex and uncertain times and ensure this district will be excellent in the next decade, we just need to admit to ourselves that there will be challenges and we're going to make mistakes. When you create change, especially bold change that we have set for ourselves, and you strive to be excellent, it's gonna be hard. Learning to work together cohesively and to be openly communicative is hard. Holding ourselves accountable is hard. It's not always unified. We're not always gonna agree. We're not always gonna like each other. But this is the work we signed up to do. So we have to learn and continue to learn and to continue to adapt, to reconsider, to evolve as the situations change. And we have to do it in the spirit of respect. And by working together, we have a stronger, unified voice to contemplate policy revisions and new rules that will make sure we create a greater certainty and an improved environment for this district and our community. And I know that we can do it if we work collectively in collaboration to fulfill the mission that we all signed up for. I last leave you with this, my advice for this year. Listen with curiosity, speak with honesty, and act with integrity. I'm looking forward to a productive, respectful year. Thank you very much. Ms. Lisa, as we spoke earlier, I turn this agenda over to you.
Thank you, President Suddeth. The next item on our agenda is a training on civility and decorum, and our general counsel is going to provide that presentation. So I will hand it over to her.
All right, thank you. I'm going to share my screen, and in the spirit of President Suddeth's encouragement for us to make these meetings short, hopefully this won't take more than 5 to 10 minutes, but we're going to walk through our policies a little bit. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you guys all see a set of pictures. It should say civility and decorum among public servants in the age of Trump. President Suddeth asked me to talk about this, especially in light of the recent quite uncivil events in our nation, and especially with respect to the district's actual policies. I use the images here as examples of things that I do not recall seeing in my history books when we look at leaders of America. I don't believe that we would see a painting of Washington or Lincoln or an image of Kennedy or even George W. Bush engaging in any of this conduct, which is bipartisan in its unsavoriness. President Trump has been vulgar. Nancy Pelosi has been petty. Lindsey Graham has been volatile. None of these things reflect well on these elected officials, but by extension, they also don't reflect well on the presidency or the Congress. We at the local level, we can do better, and we can set the stage for more appropriate conduct in the service of the public. Following the 2016 election, this was a book that was published in 2019 called A Crisis of Civility. And I thought this was an interesting quote. Political incivility is not merely a problem for political elites. Political conversations between American citizens have also become more difficult and tense. Well, why is that? It's because you as elected leaders and we as public servants are all in a role of leadership, and leadership means showing people the way. And even though this quote is about politics, which is really more electoral, that itself has led to a less civil and more coarse public discourse over the last few years. And many experts trace this to the ways in which candidate and ultimately President Trump has broken traditional norms about how elected officials conduct themselves in public. What this has done generally is to normalize conduct and language that in the past would have been shockingly inappropriate. Nevertheless, civility exists for a reason, as does decorum, and we'll talk about that briefly tonight. And I think that making sure that we can be leaders in the civility and decorum area means that we can also encourage others to behave appropriately. You know, recent events in the US Capitol are the result of years of decline in civility and decorum. And I think we can all agree that this is bad for our country and for our communities. So if leadership means setting a good example, then we need to resist against the idea that society can become more casual in certain ways and still expect the same outcomes. So let's define civility and decorum. These things are defined sort of differently in different places. If you go to Webster's dictionary, this may not be exact, but to me, there is a difference between civility and decorum. And we talk about it in the law because we have lawyer civility that the courts and our rules apply to us. But from my perspective, and the way I'd like to talk about it tonight is civility means a display of respect for those who have positions with which you disagree. It means you can disagree without being disagreeable, as I think the president said. So this is really about being respectful in an argument, in a disagreement, and how can you work through a discussion of ideas without attacking the other person, or without attacking the idea in a way that's really unfair. Decorum, on the other hand, is really an issue of etiquette for conducting oneself in public. And that means at board meetings and at other public events in which you are acting in your official role. From my perspective, decorum is about general conduct and how that conduct reflects not only on you as a person, but on the agency as a whole. So I'll give an example for me personally. I sit on some statewide boards, and I know that people look at me not just as Claire Collins, but they look at me as the general counsel for West County Wastewater. And in order for me to make sure that I maintain not only my own self-respect, but that the West County Wastewater is well regarded, I know that eyes are on me as more than just myself. They're also on me as a representative of the agency, which I take very seriously. And I want all of you to be proud of me and not embarrassed by me, and not basically violating the rules of decorum for which you expect me to act. So West County Wastewater has provided certain resources to board and staff in connection with decorum and civility. The two primary places that these arise based on my review are in the board ethics policy and in the board orientation packet. So I've just provided clips of these for you, and I will email them to you as a reminder after this meeting so that we are all on the same page. But these two things are obviously, the board ethics policy was adopted, I believe, in 2017. And this board orientation packet, tips for promoting civility in public meetings, is actually drawn from a widely distributed publication by the Institute for Local Government. With respect to the board ethics policy, I just wanted to read from section 1.3. It says directors fulfill their role and responsibilities through the relationships they have with each other, with staff, and with the public. Directors approach their work, each other, staff, and the public in a manner that reflects ethical behavior, honesty, and integrity. And the commitment of directors to their work is characterized by open, constructive communication, innovation, and creative problem solving. There's also a decorum section, which I haven't put up here because it's 8 subsections long. But I will encourage you to read it because it reflects back on this concept, and it also focuses on listening attentively, conducting yourselves with dignity and respect, honoring the role of the presiding officer, focusing on issues rather than personalities, and showing respect for and supporting the decisions that the board majority makes, even if we disagree. So again, I'm just going to point you in that direction without going into an extensive discussion of it, but it is there in our adopted ethics policy. From the tips for promoting civility in public meetings, I thought this part, and it's relatively brief, it's only about 3 pages long, but I found 2 sections at the end to be really compelling from my perspective. They say, walk the talk. For civility to be a regular part of community discourse, community leaders must set the standard. Scholars are concerned, and the data seems to demonstrate, that public officials' incivility to one another contributes to voter alienation and antipathy toward public officials and public agencies. I think we see that a little bit in the insurrection that occurred last week at the Capitol. And I think that we can do something to prevent that from happening again by being models. The tips goes on to say, a good approach is to treat people how you would like to be treated. The golden rule is a pretty good one. And this includes limiting your statements and discussions to those that move the conversation forward, keeping one's remarks brief, to the point, and non-repetitive of other comments or comments that others have made, avoiding personal attacks, and otherwise adhering to the other strategies in the tips, which basically focusing on issues, encouraging robust debate, but not personal critiques. In conclusion, and I think I've adhered to hopefully my between 5 and 10 minute limit, the experts agree that civility and decorum promote an effective board and an effective agency. Implementing civility and decorum reflects and reinforces our values as an agency, which have been clearly stated. And I'd like to echo back the president's theme. Civility and decorum facilitates service, collaboration, and accountability, and allow all of us to be more effective. So I will be forwarding to you, in order to refresh your recollection, the board ethics policy and the tips. And if you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer them. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions or comments for General Counsel? Okay, see. Director Alvarado, did you have anything?
No, I'm good. Thank you. Great presentation. Really enjoyed it.
Okay, so with that, we'll move on to the consent calendar. And the consent calendar consists of items 3 through 10 on the agenda. I'm just going to give a summary of those items. Items 3 are the meeting minutes and the proclamations for January through March. Items 5 and 7 are amendments to professional service agreements the board has previously approved. And then items 8 and 9 are for new agreements for cost estimating and design services for capital projects. And then finally, item 10 is a executive compensation item that would approve a performance bonus to the general manager. And this is for fiscal year 2020 in the amount of $26,098.80. And this is per my employment contract. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments?
General Manager, we do not have any public comment for consent calendar.
Okay, thank you. So then with that, are there any comments or questions by the board before a roll is taken, or I'm sorry, a vote is taken for a motion on the consent calendar? Looks like Director Weiner. Director Weiner, you're on mute.
Thank you. When is the appropriate time to pull items on the consent calendar? Is that
You can do that.
after the motion or before the motion?
That would be now.
Okay. This isn't exactly pulling, but I respectfully ask that we have the clerk or president read the 2 January proclamations in item 4 in the consent calendar into the appropriate place in the agenda. So we're going to approve these, but they're not going to be read. And since they are proclamations, I would think it would be best if they were spoken out loud as part of the meeting. I don't know if I need to pull the item or just request that we do that.
So actually, I'm going to have, since he's our parliamentarian, I will have our vice president answer your question.
So we don't need to pull it. Pulling it is more if you're trying to make changes. We can approve, if we like the wording in it, we can approve it with the motion. And then if the president allows it, we can read it at the end, maybe as we're ending the meeting. As we adjourn the meeting, we can read that into the agenda as our adjournment.
Do I need to make a motion to that effect?
No, sir.
No.
Motion for it, but Vice President, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Nope, I think we can, as we make a motion to, if we're going to approve, if there's no changes to the consent calendar, we can make that as part of the motion, just to say to be read as we adjourn.
Okay, I would like to pull item 6 and have our current general counsel opine on the necessity of additional counsel in this particular case before we vote on this expense. In the future, I hope counsel's opinion on the necessity of additional legal help be included in the agenda packet along with additional legal expense requests. I would also like to pull item 10 from the consent calendar to make a brief comment.
So Director Weiner, you can make the comment at this time on item 10 if you want, without pulling the item off. So you can do that as well.
Okay, I'm prepared to do that. And yes, for item 6, I'd like that pulled so that we can hear from the general counsel.
Well,
So, oh, go ahead, Ms. Clark.
I'm happy to make a brief answer to the question, which is that this is for an extension of an existing investigation that has not yet been concluded. And therefore, there needs to be an amendment to the budget so that the existing investigation being conducted by outside counsel can be concluded.
And I hope in future consent items that your comments on the matter be included as well.
Noted.
any legal expenses. All right, so instead of pulling item 10, I'm going to make a brief statement. As part of the board of directors, I approved the current general manager contract and general manager review, both of which establish the bonus plan for the general manager and establish a method for establishing an annual amount. I support the passage of this item for last fiscal year. However, after 2 years of consideration, I've come to be uncomfortable with the concept of our public service agency paying bonuses. As an employee of 2 very large publicly held corporations and eligible for bonuses, I understood the logic of paying bonuses when the corporation produced profits for its shareholders and giving employees a share of such profits. West County Wastewater is not such an organization and does not produce profits for its ratepayers or its board of directors. Since the district has recently been revisiting its habits and conventions, I would like the board to devote some time to discussing the paying bonuses. I will propose it be included on a future agenda item at the appropriate place in this agenda, which I couldn't identify from the changes. So when the appropriate time to suggest something be placed on the agenda, I would appreciate a notification.
Director Weiner, I'd like to comment on that. So you may remember that the new general manager contract that I put forward and the board approved does not include any further bonuses, and there are no other employees that receive bonuses in the organization. And that was that I proposed to the board and the board approved during my last contract. That item has already been resolved, as a reminder.
Yes.
Great. I'm sorry. There was some things in that contract that I really did not understand.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, so
Yeah,
go ahead, Vice President.
and we want to pull it so we can discuss it. Otherwise, it's going to be a conversation and it is not part of the consent calendar.
I wanted to thank the general manager for reminding me that this was resolved. And
Okay, thank you. Thank
Okay.
you.
Perfect. Just want to make sure. I mean, we can always pull it and we want to discuss it. All right. Perfect.
If you want to have it pulled and I discuss how I appreciate.
Nope.
No, I think we're good.
We're good. We're good. All right. Does anybody have anything else on the consent calendar?
Make the motion, we approve the consent calendar, please.
All right. And Director Alvarado, if I can make a quick amendment to your motion, because on the minutes of December 16th, item 4, it has Director Stanley as being a part of Division 3, and she's actually director into Division 2. So that could just be made as a correction, and then that's it. We don't need to pull it. But if that could be part of the motion. So the motion, Director Alvarado, will you mind amending it a little bit to include that and also to include reading the proclamations at the end as we are adjourning?
No problem with that at all, Vice President Cepeda.
Perfect. Thank you. Then we have that motion. Harry? Yes, Harry?
Just limit it to January.
Just January. All right. Perfect. And we'll make that as an amendment. So just January. So we have a motion. Do we have a second? I will second it.
Thank you.
We have a first and a second to approve the consent.
Okay, and I will answer the vote since we have a motion that's been properly seconded and discussion is done. So let's Madam Secretary, I will record the votes for these. So let me manage the votes for this one. Director Alvarado,
Yes.
Director Stanley. Director Stanley.
Abstain.
Thank you. Director Weiner,
Yes.
Vice President Zaveda,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Madam Clerk, you have those?
Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so move on to our regular calendar. And President Sudis, if there are no objections, I'd like to ask that item 12 be heard before item, if no one objects.
Go ahead, it's fine.
Okay, so what was item 12 is to, we'll have a discussion from Joe Neugebauer, who is our environmental programs manager. And this item is to establish a temporary fee waiver for our food establishment fog inspection program. And Joe, I see Joe is here. He's going to give a brief presentation, and then at the end, we'll, of course, be happy to answer any questions. So we'll turn over to you, Joe.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, directors, for hearing me today. I want to present this item here, which is our food service establishment inspection fee waiver program, which is a temporary program. It arose basically from the issues related to the COVID-19 pandemic. As you know, from March 17th, 2020, a lot of businesses were shut down, restaurants, food service establishments being severely impacted. Many of them have closed down. Some of them have remained open, but only in a limited capacity or for takeout service only. And we were receiving quite a few calls about not being able to pay the inspection fee. So just a quick background on that. We have an inspection fee for performing our fats, oils, and grease program inspections, where we go in and we check their grease removal devices and make sure that they're being properly maintained. And there's as of now, our rate is $316 per inspection, and that includes any follow-ups that need to be done due to non-compliance. So what we're proposing basically is to suspend those fees retroactive to March 17th, 2020 through December 31st, 2021. And a lot of it is because of them being severely impacted by this pandemic. There's a lot of financial issues with them being able to pay the fee. And then there's also a lot of financial or administrative burden on our staff for having to issue these invoices and then not getting paid, having to follow up. So there's a lot of inefficiency with having to do that. So by suspending these fees for this limited period of time, we can relieve that and still be able to perform these inspections in an efficient and effective way. So I believe you have copies of the full program. Like I said, it'll be temporary through the end of this year, unless we think that it needs to be continued after that. The fiscal impact is, we're estimating between $45,000 to $60,000, and all of those funds will be recovered through unencumbered sources. So things like property tax revenue, which we have over $1 million that we can pull from that. So it won't be funded through any ratepayer sources. So that's really the nuts and bolts of the program. And we feel it's also a good outreach to the community. We have a lot of our restaurants and food service establishments are owned by small family run businesses and people who live in our service area. So we feel it would be a nice olive branch, so to speak, to a sector of business that is really struggling right now because of the pandemic. So I can take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Joe. I did want to just take a second before you start with any questions and really commend Joe for coming up with this and being very responsive to what was going on with our community and coming up with a plan to address that during this time. So I just wanted to acknowledge and thank Joe for doing that. I know he's worked on this for quite some time. So with that, if the board has any questions.
I have none.
Director Weiner. Director Weiner. You're on mute. You're saying something brilliant, but you're on mute.
Again, thank you for reminding me. There's a TV on in my house and I don't want it to interrupt our meeting, so I'm leaving myself on mute mostly. Wholeheartedly support this. I truly wish I had proposed this. This is awesome. Thank you, Joe, for your leadership.
Thank you. All right. Director Zepeda, you want to say something?
Can I ask a quick question about recouping the funds? Are we able to apply through the state or the federal to try to recoup it through COVID-19 resources out there? I know that there's always something coming up that our type of agencies might be able to get financial assistance. And maybe this could be one of them.
I'm not familiar with anything like that, but I could look into that for sure.
Yeah, I had forwarded a newsletter from, I think it was from CASA or one of the separate newsletters. So I think there was something in there. I forwarded over to Lisa. I'm not sure if Lisa, maybe you can share it, or I don't know if it's applicable or not, but it'd be great to be able to recoup it there.
Yeah, so we are definitely monitoring. Justin has his eye on the different funding opportunities for recovery. So we will take a look and see if this is appropriate. Again, this is, not a huge amount, and we do have some funds that we can pull from without negatively impacting anything else. But we can certainly take a look at if it's appropriate to look for reimbursement to cover that.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
All right. So if there are no more questions, let's move to public comments. Do we have any public comments on this item? Ms. Brenda.
Madam President, we do not have any public comment for this item.
Great. So may I have a motion?
Move the item.
Thank you, sir. Director Alvarado, thank you so much. Is there a second?
Second.
And Director Weiner, thank you for the second. So the motion's been made, it's been properly seconded. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Director Alvarado?
Yes.
Thank you. Director Weiner?
Yes.
Director Sutta? Excuse me, Director Stanley?
Yes.
And Vice President Zepeda?
Yes.
And President?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so item 11 is the item that we reversed, and this is on the committees and special representatives. And President Sutta will be presenting this item. And Madam Clerk, we have an item to pull up on the screen for reference. If you could do that at this time. Okay. Thank you. So President Sutta, this is your document.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right. So as we discussed earlier, we are making a few changes on how we handle board committees and liaison representation assignments. We made a little change with the planning committee and the environmental, the climate change committee. We're scrapping the planning committee, and we are going to be moving that into the finance administration committee. And we're scrapping the climate change committee, and we're going to be moving that, and it will now become a part of the infrastructure operations and environmental committee. These two committees align better with the way that the district is aligned with the district's environmental structure. The F&A committee or FEC committee will be chaired by Vice President Zepeda with Director Weiner, and Director Alvarado will be the alternate. The IOE committee, the Infrastructure Operations and Environment committee, will be chaired by Director Alvarado with Director Weiner. and Zepeda will be the alternate. Really excited about the ad hoc committee, the countdown to 100. Will actually be a committee that the general manager will establish. It disappeared. But the general manager will establish, and that committee will focus on coordinating. I can do it. There you go. And that committee will be coordinated by the general manager. And we'll focus on the countdown to the 100th anniversary. Is it big, large enough for all of you guys? Yes, no, maybe?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. The WCA, West County Agency, myself and Director Alvarado will be in those meetings with Vice President Zepeda as an alternate. The CSDA will be myself and Director Wiener. CASA, myself and Director Zepeda. Aqua, myself and Director Zepeda. And then the Bay Area Biosolids Coalition, myself, Director Wiener, and Director Zepeda. AWEA, which is the Association of Water Agencies. And it is open for whomever would like to also attend those meetings with me. The National Association of Latino Elected Officials and the Bay Area Association of Latino Elected Officials is myself, along with Director Zepeda and our Vice President Zepeda and Director Alvarado. And Women in Water, unless one of you guys would also like to attend with me, it's just myself. Other local organizations. I signed this based on some of where you live and some of where you have been attending according to your previous attendance. Also, Bronte Chamber, Director Wiener, and I will be your alternate. The Richmond Chamber, Vice President Zepeda and myself. Also, Brandon Mack, Director Wiener, and myself as your alternate. North Richmond Mac, Director Alvarado with Vice President Zepeda as your alternate. City of Richmond, actually that one is incorrect. It's actually City of Richmond will be myself and Vice President Zepeda. City of San Pablo is Director Alvarado. Contra Costa Board of Supervisors, myself and Vice President Zepeda. The Mayor's Conference, myself, Director Zepeda, Alvarado, and Director Wiener. North Richmond Levy, Director Wiener, Vice President Zepeda, and then Director Alvarado. The Contra Costa Environmental 350 and Climate Reality Project is myself and Vice President Zepeda. Director Wiener, if you would like to also attend there, I just need you to let me know. Those are two different groups, just so all of you guys know. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District and the Community Emission Redevelopment Plan. Myself and Director Zepeda, also Director Wiener, if you would also like to be on that one, also let me know. Those are two different groups also, and they do deal with our air quality for anyone who has anything to do with manufacturing and any of the wastewater or water districts. EPA meetings, both US and Cal EPA. Right now they're meeting, of course, via Zoom, as well as the OSHA meetings, and they do COVID trainings and general trainings. Again, whoever would like to be on those, just let me know. Right now, that is it for that, but I do want to talk to you about what the difference is, what we have, the other differences made. Why do we divide in this way? What has changed is this. We are going to be assigning directors to attend as the official liaison for the district, so that we don't have 5 people showing up at the mayor's conference or 5 people showing up with San Pablo City Council. And then no one showing up at a CASA meeting or a CSDA meeting or an AQUA meeting. It is totally appropriate for Director Winter, who is in the El Sobrante area, to be in El Sobrante MAC meeting to find out what's going on there. Or 2 people who may live or in the North Richmond levy meeting if he is representing the West County wastewater in that area. So we are going to be doing this a little bit differently. Ms. Brenda will be pre-filling the service forms based on this sheet that you just saw. And you will already have your meetings for your board meetings pre-filled, your committee meetings pre-filled, and your community meetings pre-filled. What you did not see on that form was a meeting with the general manager. I excluded it from the list of service days. I did it intentionally because I believe that those meetings should be an integral part of your duty as a director. What I would like for us to move towards is more training. Trainings on SQL or PFAS or PFOA or ethics or board governance or biosolids or SB 332 or something to fill in. If you did 4 days of meetings, then fill in your 5th or 6th day with a training. This district pays for CASA dues and CSDA dues and AQUA dues, and they have webinars and trainings that we can all take advantage of. And we should be attending things on various wastewater policy, regulatory, and leadership training courses and webinars by these industry partners, so that we can become better versed in what it is that we are supposed to be doing as directors. Directors are welcome to attend meetings, even if they're not the designated district liaison, but only if you're the designated district liaison are you authorized to claim that meeting or event as a service day. So if you're the alternate or you're not listed at all, it's best for you to check to see. If it's a CASA meeting or a CSDA meeting, it is in our board policies that those are acceptable events. Otherwise, you've been designated for any of those meetings. And there's more than enough meetings on that list for all of us to get in at least 6 each month. Any questions? This list will be sent to you after the meeting. Yes, sir. Director Alvarado.
Just one point of clarification now. When we get back to the real world where we got CASA trainings and CSDA, will those be counting as days of service or not?
Yes. You say that again? I'm sorry.
So when the COVID thing is over and we start having our CASA trainings and CSDA, who can legitimately attend those meetings or those trainings? I'm not necessarily talking about meetings, I'm talking about training.
All of us.
Okay.
That's included in our board policy, so everybody can attend those. All of us. You can attend those now. All of us can. All of us can attend those trainings. On that list, when I mentioned CSDA, those are the monthly meetings.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about those.
No, generally not monthly, I'm sorry, quarterly. Generally, the only person who was attending them was me and sometimes Harry,
Right.
the trainer. But any CSDA training, you can attend that right now. You can log on to a webinar. They're on demand right now and get credit for that.
Okay.
But after this, if we all 4 or 5 of us can go to the CSDA or CASA conference when this is over, and all of us will get trained, credit for that.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that, President Sutter.
Sure, no problem. Yes, Director Weiner.
When we are not attending, what will the, would we notify the board clerk and say that the meeting is available to our alternate? Or how would that, how do you hand off the I mean, how does the role of the alternate work?
You can notify me and the board clerk. If you're gonna notify the board clerk, and just copy me so that I can know and I can maybe tell them, or you can tell the alternate yourself. I think that's part of the whole collaborative spirit, right? We're working in collaboration with one another. So I would do it that way. I think that's, you can, because you've done it before. One of the best things that you did last year for me personally was when you contacted me to tell me that you were not able to attend the Pioneers event. And you say, would you like to go? I loved it. And I went and stayed. Something like that is what we should be collaborating on. So you will get this list probably right after this meeting, and you guys will know who your alternate is, especially for some of the ones where we are really actual rep, like the West County Agency, CSDA, or CASA, or Bay Area Biosolvers. If I can't go, it's going to be imperative that you go, or Cesar go. That's why there's 2 other people. So somehow we have to work together to make sure that the other person knows that they have to be able to go. Yes, sir.
Okay, I understand that. Thank you. The other question I have is regarding scheduling. Some of these things we pay dues on, and some we don't. And maintaining my calendar is kind of difficult. It would be good if we had listed these items. You said they're going to be pre-entered, so the dates and times are known ahead of time. So if we could get a list of that so that we could update our calendars with those different meetings that have been assigned, that would be a great help.
So let me work with Ms. Lisa and the board clerk and see what we can get for you. How about that?
Sounds great.
Okay. All right.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Isn't
ma'am.
the board pass by resolution what days of service were available to the board, or was that something else?
Just the number.
And
Yes, go ahead.
and regardless of what it is, are you changing the way that we decide things in being the board president? You're deciding certain things are available for days of service and certain days not, and you unilaterally are deciding that?
I'm gonna let Ms. Claire answer you.
Yeah, the days of, you're correct, Director Stanley, the days of service policy, it has been adopted by the board, and it does currently provide for meetings, for example, with the general manager to be counted as days of service. So I take what the president is saying is that, and we discussed bringing back a change to the policy that would change that from, instead of meetings with the GM, covering all of these other internal and external meetings plus trainings, which are also covered in the policy currently. So that would be brought back to the board for consideration, I believe, if that's correct, President Suddeth, next month.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so, but this is not precluding anybody, any director from attending whatever meeting they want to observe.
No.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Ms. Claire, you had something to add?
Well, I just want to make sure that it's clear that at least from my interpretation of this, what we're talking about is your official designation as attending on behalf of the district, which would be compensated as a day of service. These are generally public meetings, so of course the public always has an opportunity to attend. It would just be not in one's official capacity unless you are designated as such. So that's the only distinction. And if you're not in an official capacity, then they would not be considered days of service generally.
And let me explain why that's important. One of the reasons it's important is that sometimes, especially when outside is legal, we have to pay for dinner sometimes for some of these meetings. There was an occasion before where we were paying for 4 or 5 dinners for some of these meetings. And we're going to be mindful of that. So if we are designating Director Wiener and Director Zepeda as the 2 official, because for instance, let's just say the mayor's conference, they automatically allot 2 persons as the district representatives. So if we say that the 2 official district representatives for that event are Director Wiener and Vice President Zepeda, then those are the 2 persons who will be representing West County wastewater at that event. That does not preclude Director Stanley or Director Alvarado from going, but they are not the official representatives at that event for that day. You can go, but you're not representing West County wastewater in official capacity for that event. Director Wiener and Vice President Zepeda are. So the 2 paid dinners are going to be listed on the registration, and the 2 representatives are going to be listed as Vice President Zepeda and Director Wiener.
And a point of clarification, please, Madam President.
Yes, ma'am.
If the one-on-one meetings are no longer considered days of service, will the habit of buying a meal with the directors be curtailed also?
I don't think I got your whole question.
Well, I went through
I'm sorry.
several meetings with our general manager, and the general manager was kind enough to buy lunch or breakfast or whatever it was. And why, that's nice. I never felt comfortable with it. So I'm asking now for clarification. If our one-on-ones are not considered days of service, are we also going to subscribe to the same optics and not have directors' meals purchased by our general manager?
Miss Claire, I mean, I don't know the answer to that because it's not my domain. I'm not saying that you can't meet with the general manager. I'm just saying that it's not one of your 6 days. So
President,
Claire, just one moment, Miss Lisa. Let me see if Miss Claire can answer that for her, because I'm not. There's no my.
I'm looking at the policy right now, and I'm sorry I don't have an answer, but maybe the general manager does.
Okay.
Yeah, that is not a really not contemplated in this policy, and I think that those the meals that were purchased were within the policies, the other policies that dictate meals. So I don't think that the board should be micromanaging an operational decision that already exists within a policy. So, and it was not necessarily a practice that all directors actually did meet over a meal. And I did want to just be on the record that Director Stanley never expressed to me a discomfort with those meals. So that is the first I'm hearing with it. I would have been more than happy to not purchase that for her, but I was never expressed to me before. So I don't really think that's a board policy at this point.
Okay, so thank you. All right, so I will give this out to everyone. The only thing that we have to think about tonight is the 2 board standing committees. So the only thing that I want to finalize this evening are those 2 things. And do you need to see them again, or can I just repeat them to you?
Read people.
Okay, so finance administration would be just those 2. Can you just make them bigger for them, Miss Brenda? The only things that we are approving right now are the 2 board standing committees. That's it.
So I would just like to mention that these were the 2 committees that were mentioned in the board packet. And so I think that the president, if I may just state what I think the question
Yes, ma'am.
before the board is to establish the Finance and Administration Committee with Vice President Zepeda as the chair, Director Weiner as the second member, and Director Alvarado as the alternate for the calendar year 2021, goodness, and establishing the Infrastructure Operations and Environment Committee with Director Alvarado as the chair, Director Weiner as the second member, and Vice President Zepeda as the alternate. And so that would be the recommendation of the president, and I believe that that's what would be called for a motion and a second. Is that correct?
I'll call the question and make the motion to approve that.
Thank you, sir.
I'll second it.
Thank you, sir. Motion has been made and seconded, and Director Weiner.
Yeah, I wanted to make some comments that I wrote up when I reviewed the packet.
Is this about this motion?
Yeah, this is about this motion. This is directly related to this motion. Madam President, it is your purview to make these changes during your tenure, and as a matter of course, the board has always supported the president's choices. I will follow tradition and vote to support these changes. I will take the opportunity to express some concerns about them. My sole experience as a board director has been 4 years serving the ratepayers of West County Wastewater. And in that time, I have seen fundamental changes to the board that I joined. But one feature that was consistent was the board governed the district. The board led the district. In this reorganization of the committees, I see the board more being led. In the report, the phrase, "the Global Warming Committee appears to have a scope that exceeds the authority of a local wastewater agency," stated without specifics at all. And I see it, I kind of objected to that language because it seems like an effort to rein in the board. When I was recruited to the board, it was for the specific purpose of expanding the scope and reach of this district to do public good. Not to follow convention, but to lead. In my occasional meeting with our district supporters, it is universally remarked that our district is admired for our leadership. As an example of recent leadership, even though our district is not officially charged with solving global warming, as a board, we entered the district into the fray. I hope this alignment with district structures does not limit the board's creativity and social activism, but I am concerned that it will. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. And we have a motion, and we have a second. And
Sorry,
Yeah,
President, we just need to call for public comment before we take a vote.
I was just getting ready. Do we have any public comments on this item?
Madam President, we do not have any public comment for this item.
Wonderful. So we can close it and we can take a vote. So Madam Clerk, please call.
Thank you, Director Alvarado.
Absolutely, yes.
Director Stanley.
Thank you, Director Weiner. I agree with your comments, and I vote yes.
Director Weiner?
Yes.
Vice President
Yes.
Tabor?
Yes.
And President Sedif?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Ms. Lisa?
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is for, this is for general manager, staff, and general counsel comments. General manager and staff don't have any comments. So general counsel, do you have anything? Okay, so the next item on the agenda is time for the director's comments and meeting reports.
All right. Fellow directors, do you have any meetings to report on or any general comments? I will limit it to 2 minutes each. Director Weiner. Director Weiner and then Director Alvarado. You're on mute, Director
muted.
Weiner.
Okay, I have 4 sentences and you can't hear them if I'm muted. I attended the El Sobrante Chamber of Commerce and they discussed offering membership due forgiveness since they cannot really offer any services in times of COVID, and mentioned that there might not be a stroll for the 2nd year in a row. I attended the mayor's conference. It was mostly a reorganization meeting. Director Alvarado's wife was seated as mayor, and preview of large issues such as transportation, housing being dictated by the state.
Thank you, Director Alvarado.
I also attended the mayor's conference, but I'm going to let Director Weiner's comment stand. Thank you very much. I attended the City of San Pablo council meeting, and they swore in a new city town clerk because Patricia Ponce was elected council member this past year. So she'll be there for 4 years. Other than that, I have nothing else to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Zepeda, or Vice President Zepeda, sorry about that.
I attended some of the same meetings, nothing really more to report. City of Richmond, everybody's doing reorganizations. So nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Stanley.
I took a holiday, so no, I have nothing to report.
Thank you. And thank you very much.
Ms. President,
All right.
yes. Point of clarification. Would this time slot, and this will be for Ms. Claire as well, would this be the right time slot to add future agenda items? Is this where this would go in the future?
So I'm going to clarify something for you on that future agenda items. Actually, I'll ask Ms. Claire to do it for you. And then we will read this proclamation that you guys asked to have moved to the end. We can read that right after that. But Ms. Claire, you want to clarify that?
So in discussions with the president, one of the things that I had raised with the president is that under the Brown Act, the provision for requesting future agenda items typically is intended to be an exception from the requirement that something be agendized. So for example, in the Brown Act, it says that the directors may not deliberate on any issues that are not on the agenda, except in order to respond to brief questions or in order to ask that a future agenda item be placed on the agenda, which is usually in response to something that's come up out of the ordinary. So one of the discussions we had was that if you do have a future agenda item, that perhaps it would be better to take that up individually with the general manager ahead of time before bringing it before the board, because there may already be something in the works. But of course, you're free during this period to make any director's comments that you seek to do. It doesn't preclude a vote on that, but the request was that items could be brought to the general manager directly, and then perhaps your questions could be answered, or you could find out joyfully that something was already on the advance calendar.
Thank you.
May I ask a question and a comment?
Sure.
So one, it's in our board policy that we can add agenda items. And the whole reason being is because in the past, we had a future agenda item section, and agendas would be or items would be called on, and then they would never actually come back up. So then we made it to where if the whole board really wants to listen to that and give direction to staff to work on that particular item, that it got voted on here. As opposed to, somebody saying, let's talk about purple trees, and I want that on a future agenda item, and then either goes on the list and it never gets brought up, or staff starts working on it, but the board really doesn't want to hear about purple trees, right? So we don't want to just lead them on somewhere. So that we decided that here is where the board will then say, yes, we're all going to vote on it, or no, we don't want to hear about it. We're not going to put it in a future agenda item. So that's where that history comes from. And again, it's also on the board policy. So if we're going to change it, we'll have to change it on the board policy.
I'll take another look at the board policy because I was one of the ones who wanted it off of the agenda, because it's one of those things where, one, you can talk to the general manager, or it's one of those things where I seriously think it's something that should be in committee. It should not be during these board meetings. It's a committee item. I see you, Director Alvarado, just one moment. And it's one of those things where people feel compelled to contribute this list of things that they want to talk about. And we weren't really voting on them. It was just people pontificating on what they want to say. Oh, you think I think I might want to talk about this. Oh, I think I might want to talk about this. And it never became a thing. It was just a thing to mention. And we never voted on anything. It was just people throwing out ideas, rather than if it's something that you really want to talk about and you really want to have on the agenda. And I looked back at a lot of our meetings, and it was things that every time someone brought it up, the general manager would say, we're already planning on doing that at this next meeting, or a meeting 6 months from now, or 3 months from now, or 2 months from now. So the idea for that is, can we just check with her to see if it's something we're going to talk about soon, or it's already in the strategic plan, or we have 2 new committees. Let's talk about it in committee, and then bring it back to the general board. Just a moment, Ms. Claire, Director Alvarado.
My comments, I do want our general counsel to kind of guide me a little bit, but I think that us bringing up future meeting agenda items was a real stalled up process before, only because we got into the context. And I think a future meeting agenda item needs to be brought up and said, hey, I want to talk about this at the meeting, and not talk about why you want to do it. Because I believe that is violating the Brown Act, only because it's not on the agenda. So I think each individual item, if it's brought up, you say, hey, do we have a motion to put this in the agenda, without people asking questions or saying, whatever, or pontificating, like you said, because a lot of that was going on. So I believe that if you have a future meeting agenda item, then that item needs to be brought up and see if there's a second. If there's a second, then you vote on it and you move on and say whether or not it's going to be on the agenda or not. Now, will that violate the Brown Act, General Counsel?
You can say that. Go ahead.
This discussion right now is getting close to violating the Brown Act, because we're deliberating on something that's not on the agenda. So that's what I want to say. As I mentioned before, these things can be brought up during director's comments. There's nothing that prevents it, but I think that the policy reasons that have been described here, perhaps it can warrant another discussion. Director Zepeda is correct. There's a section 5.4b says that you can request, a director can request an item be placed on a future board agenda during the discussion on future meeting agenda items. But if we can consider that a lesser and included portion of director's comments, it's not necessarily gone. But I would ask that the directors withhold any further comments on this issue, and that if necessary, we can bring it up at a future time. But it really should be stopped at this point, so that we don't move toward a discussion on an item not on the agenda.
Thank you.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other director comments or meeting reports, so we can move past this? Thank you. All right, so the only thing I wanted to comment was, besides the meetings that I attended, I did listen in on the legislative report for the states. And I will just submit it in writing because there's a lot going on the infrastructure committee, a lot of changes based on the elections and the finalized elections and the shift of the balance of power in DC and the shift here in the state of California, which will affect, of course, us and some of our legislation that'll be coming through. The governor released his interim budget. And so that will affect us. Those who haven't been paying attention, I hope you start paying attention to that budget because we're gonna need some of that money. And some money hopefully will be trickling down through the infrastructure bill and the water bill, which does, that water is water and wastewater. And lastly, I'm gonna say this, and so I want us to look at this. I look at what we're doing here is a three-legged stool. The stool itself is the district. And then the three legs that prop up this district has to be us as members of this board, the general counsel and the general manager and the executive team. And we have to work together. We cannot look at this as we are, as if we're looking down at people in this district. We have to work together. I started this conversation about collaboration, and I will end this conversation about collaboration. And there is nothing that anyone can say that is going to change my mind about how we can move together to be successful unless we focus on collaboration. And so I will speak about it from January to December 31. It is the only tool we have to work together. Not one individual can make this work. Ms. Brenda, would you please do us the honor of reading the proclamation that Director Wiener spoke of earlier in the meeting?
I will share my screen as well so that everyone can follow along. And Madam President, would you like me to read the entire proclamation here?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Before you do, we are getting ready to read something from a man who gave his life in the spirit of cooperation, collaboration, teamwork, and putting himself above all else. He put his ego to the side to make sure that other people could have. So I hope that you take something out of this more than surface and words. That you can just please, whatever animus, whatever you are harboring, that especially now in this country, what everybody's going through, that you can figure out how to let go and move forward in this spirit. Please proceed, Ms. Brenda.
Thank you. Our January proclamation is in recognition of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. month. Whereas Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., born Michael Luther King Jr. in Atlanta, Georgia on January 15, 1929, was an American Baptist minister and leader in the civil rights movement from 1954 until his assassination on April 4, 1968. And whereas Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was baptized, ordained, and served as co-pastor with his father until 1968 at Ebenezer Baptist Church, which played a critical role in influencing his Christian values and his pursuit of justice and equality. And whereas Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is widely known for advancing civil rights through nonviolence and civil disobedience. And whereas Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led the 1955 Montgomery bus boycott, and in 1957, he became the first president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And whereas, while serving as president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. helped organize the nonviolent 1963 protests in Birmingham, Alabama. And he helped organize the 1963 March on Washington, where he delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. And whereas, on October 14, 1964, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for combating racial inequality through nonviolence resistance. And whereas in 1965, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. helped organize the Selma to Montgomery marches. And in 1966, he and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference took the movement to Chicago, Illinois to work on segregated housing. And whereas during his final years, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. expanded his focus to include opposition towards poverty and the Vietnam War. And whereas the idea of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a holiday was initially promoted by labor unions in contract negotiations, then introduced as a bill by legislators, but faced opposition and fell short on votes until the King Center reached out to the corporate community and the general public for support and launched a signature-raising campaign. And whereas, to continue the momentum of support for the bill, in 1980, iconic R&B musician Stevie Wonder released the single "Happy Birthday" to popularize the campaign. And in 1981, he hosted the Rally for Peace Press Conference, ultimately resulting in 6 million signatures, the largest petition in favor of an issue in US history, collected for a petition to Congress to pass the law. And whereas on November 2nd, 1983, President Ronald Reagan signed the bill proposed by Congresswoman Katie Beatrice Hall to create a federal holiday honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And whereas Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day was first observed as a federal holiday on January 20th, 1986, and continues to be observed as an official federal holiday the third Monday of January every year. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the directors of the West County Wastewater District hereby proclaim January as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Month and encourages all constituents and visitors alike to join us in celebrating this special month.
Thank you so much. Do something Monday in service to others. It's a day of service. Yes, Director Wiener. You're on mute.
The TV's off. I can go back to all on mute. There was a second one for January, a second resolution for January.
Okay.
Okay, I will go ahead and share my screen on that one as well. The second proclamation is in recognition of National Religious Freedom Day, January 16, 2021. Whereas the President of the United States has annually declared January 16th to be National Religious Freedom Day since 1993. The goal of this observance is to protect and promote religious expression rights. And whereas on January 16th, 1786, the Virginia State Assembly adopted the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, drafted by Thomas Jefferson in 1777. As a result, the Church of England in Virginia was disestablished and people of different faiths were granted freedom of religion. Catholics, Protestants, and Jews were all given equal rights to express their religious beliefs. Religious Freedom Day was first proclaimed in 1996 and has been proclaimed every year since then by a statement by the President of the United States of America. And whereas religious freedom in America, often referred to as our first freedom, was a driving force behind some of the earliest defining moments of our American identity. The desire for religious freedom impelled the Pilgrims to leave their homes in Europe and journey to a distant land, and it is the reason so many others seeking to live out their faith or change their faith have made America their home. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the directors of the West County Wastewater do hereby recognize and proclaim January 16th, 2021 as Religious Freedom Day, and encourages all constituents and visitors alike to commemorate this day with events and activities that remind us of our shared heritage of religious liberty and that teach us how to secure this blessing both at home and around the world. And that is all.
Thank you so much. So Monday, as I said, Monday, do something, service to other people is National Day of Service, and hope you all do something, service to other people. Director Alvarado, you have something?
Yeah, I just have one more thing to say. Today we witnessed the first president in the history of the United States that got impeached twice by the House of Representatives. And we should all take heed to that and say, job well done by the House. Now the Senate needs to step up and finish this duty that we as Americans deserve. This president incited riots in the Capitol, something we haven't seen in over 200 years. I mean, it was shameful. And I want to congratulate Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who will be our president and vice president next week. I'm sorrowful I can't be there, but whoever will be, you're blessed. Thank you.
So next week we will have the inauguration, next Wednesday. I'll leave you with this one. Love truth, even if it hurts you, and hate lies, even if they help you. I hope I'm gonna leave you with what I left you with earlier. Listen with curiosity. Speak with honesty and act with integrity.
Amen.
Madam Clerk, seeing as we have no more business on our roster this evening, I believe we get to hear the magic words that we all like so much.
Absolutely.
And you get to say them.
Not me. General Manager, would you like to say?
Go ahead. Meeting is adjourned.
Okay. So last item is adjournment.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Have a
You
good.
all.
We will have a new president. We will have a new United States president when we meet again.